Turning off means that the phone or other electronic device is actually off and not in a silent or vibrating mode. You may use these devices during recesses, but even then, you must not use your cell phone or electronic device to find out any information about the case or to communicate with anyone about the case or the people involved in this case. Do not take photographs, video recordings, or audio recordings of the proceedings or of your fellow jurors. After each recess, please double check to make sure your cell phone or electronic device is turned off. At the end of the case, while you are deliberating, you must not communicate with anyone outside of the jury room. You cannot have in the jury room any cell phones, computers, or other electronic devices. If someone needs to contact you in an emergency, we can receive messages and deliver them to you without delay. A contact phone number will be provided for you at the end of the trial. Jurors must not have any discussions of any sort with friends or family members about the case or the people and places involved. So do not let even the closest family members make comments to you or ask questions about this trial. In this age of electronic communication, I want to stress again that just as you must not talk face-to-face about this case, you must not talk about this case by using any electronic device. You must not use phones, computers, or other electronic devices to communicate. Do not send or accept any messages related to this case or your jury service. Do not discuss this case or ask for advice by any means at all, including posting information on internet websites, chat rooms, or blogs. So what are the reasons for these rules? These rules are imposed because jurors must decide the case without distraction and only on the evidence that is presented inside this courtroom. If you investigate, research, or make inquiries on your own, I have no way to make sure that the information you obtain is proper for this case. The parties, likewise, have no opportunity to dispute or challenge the accuracy of the information that you find. That is contrary to our judicial system, which assures every party the right to ask questions about and challenge the evidence being considered against it and to present argument with respect to that evidence. Any independent investigation by a juror unfairly and improperly prevents the parties from having that opportunity our judicial system promises. Any juror who violates these restrictions jeopardizes the fairness of these proceedings, and a mistrial could result that would require the entire trial process to start over. A mistrial is a tremendous expense and inconvenience to the parties, the court, and the taxpayers. If you violate these rules, you may be held in contempt of court and face sanctions such as serving time in jail, paying a fine, or both. In every criminal proceeding, a defendant has the absolute right to remain silent. At no time is it the duty of a defendant to prove his or her innocence. From the exercise of a defendant's right to remain silent, a jury is not permitted to draw any inference of guilt, and the fact that a defendant did not take the witness stand must not influence your verdict in any manner whatsoever. The attorneys are trained in the rules of evidence and trial procedure, and it is their duty to make all objections they feel are proper. When an objection is made, you should not speculate on the reason why it is made. Likewise, when an objection is sustained or upheld by me, you must not speculate on what might have occurred had the objection not been sustained, nor what a witness might have said had he or she been permitted to answer the question. During the trial, it may be necessary to confer with the attorneys outside of your hearing to discuss matters that require consideration by me alone. It is impossible to predict when such a conference may be required or how long it might last. When such conferences occur, they will be conducted so as to consume as little of your time as necessary for a fair and orderly trial of the case. If you would like to take notes during this trial, you may do so. On the other hand, of course, you are not required to take notes if you do not want to. That will be left up to you individually. You each have a pad that should contain a folder that should contain a pad and a pen. So if you want to go ahead and pull those out now, you can do so. Any notes that you take will be for your own personal use. However, you should not take them with you from the courtroom. During recesses, we will take possession of your notes and we will then return them to you when we reconvene. After you have completed your deliberations, we will collect your notes and they will be delivered to me and they will then be destroyed. No one will ever read your notes. If you take notes, please do not get so involved in the note taking that you become distracted from these proceedings. Your notes should only be used as aids to your memory. Whether or not you take notes, you should rely on your memory of the evidence, and you should not be unduly influenced by the notes of other jurors. Notes are not entitled to any greater weight than each juror's memory of the evidence. Those are all the instructions I have for you at this time. I'll have some more for you at the conclusion of the trial. With that, we're ready to begin our opening statements. State, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. May it please the court. Just to introduce myself, my name is Spencer Hathaway, and I'm one of the prosecutors that sits at this table with Ashley Terwilliger. And say none of us are real excited about being here. About 1 o'clock in the morning, December 29th, 2019. It was 2 years ago, pre-COVID. There was a highway patrolman going northbound on 95, approaching exit 210. The car that the trooper took notice of was driven by someone who will become known to you as Christopher Butler. Christopher Butler is our victim in this case. Christopher Butler was driving erratically on 95. He was doing 10 miles per hour, then he was doing 30 miles per hour. He was swerving. He was clearly driving erratically and in a unsafe manner. Should not have been driving. Trooper White puts on his lights and sirens to effectuate a traffic stop on Butler. At this point, he doesn't know whether Butler's having a medical episode, whether he's under the influence, or whether he's just a bad driver. He doesn't know. Well, as it turns out, Butler was under the influence. He had taken a whole boatload of over-the-counter cough medicine, Corseed, which when taken in high quantities, you'll hear causes a high. And we're not hiding that fact. He was under the influence of this cough medicine, and he was driving erratically, and he should not have been behind the wheel. As pursuit progresses, he doesn't stop. Butler doesn't stop. 2 St. Johns County Sheriff's vehicles join the pursuit. One is driven by Anthony Deleo. One is driven by Joseph McGinnis. Neither of them are St. Johns County Sheriff's deputies today because of this event. As they take the exit on 210, Butler runs 2 red lights, still driving outside the scope of what's appropriate and safe. He goes through red lights, and these now 3 patrol vehicles are behind him, lighting him up. They're trying to stop him. Again, at this point, don't know if he's ill, tired, impaired, or just a bad driver. They pull into a parking lot there at 210 and 95, or just off of the exit of a Winn-Dixie shopping center. There's a Domino's, there's some other shops there, but there's also a Daly's gas station. And that's an important piece of this case, the Daly's. Because Chris Butler's girlfriend at the time worked at that Daly's. And Chris Butler thought, hey, there might be a chance I'm going to jail tonight, so I'm going to park that car at the Daly's. Maybe they won't impound the car. He knew he shouldn't have been driving. But it's also important because also in the pursuit behind the police cars was a gentleman named Ramsey Bate. And Ramsey's a regular citizen who is just driving, doesn't know anybody in this whole issue here, doesn't know him. But he is filming with his cell phone. He's a bystander. And when he pulls in behind this pursuit, he parks at the dailies and continues to film with his cell phone, Mr. Bate. And you'll be able to see that video. You'll be able to see some of the video of the chase and then everything that transpires afterwards in the Winn-Dixie parking lot. And that's the crux of what we're doing here today, is what transpired in the Winn-Dixie parking lot. And as I said, Chris Butler has made his mistakes. He's no angel. Chris Butler was on probation at the time. That's why he was taking Coracetin and over-the-counter medicine, because it won't show up on a drug test. And he has 3 felony convictions. He's not an angel. But it's also important to note that at the time of the pursuit, law enforcement officers did not know that. He was driving his girlfriend's car. They didn't know who was behind the wheel, and they didn't know why he was driving the way he was driving. They get into the corner of the Winn-Dixie parking lot up against a curb. That's where Butler's car comes to rest. Out of the cars comes Trooper White of the Highway Patrol, former Deputy Deleo, former Deputy McGinnis. First one to the door is Deleo. And you'll see the videos that we have are from Bate at the dailies and from the dash cam of the trooper's cruiser, which has some cameras set up on the front of the car. You won't see axons because troopers don't wear body cameras and St. John Sheriff's deputies don't wear axon body cameras. There are no body cameras. None of the officers in either of those agencies wear them. So the only videos we have are from the trooper's dash and from Bate, the bystander. The trooper's car is positioned to the behind and to the right of Butler's car, boxes and men. So you're seeing from basically the vantage point of the rear passenger side looking diagonally at the driver. First thing you see is Deleo's the first one to the door. He opens the door and he punches him directly in the face. It's within seconds of being at the door, Deleo punches Butler in the face. Butler is not compliant. In fact, he's high on cough medicine. He's not necessarily combative. You'll see the video, but he is not compliant. And they bring him out of the car by force, since he's not compliant. And Trooper White deploys his taser. While Trooper White is deploying his taser, and he ultimately would zap him 4 times with that taser, Trooper White would. While that's going on, Deleo has pulled out his baton, which is a metal rod that is telescoping. It gets larger as you kind of make a wrist flicking motion. It gets longer. It's about yay big. We'll hopefully have one you can pass around later on the trial. And you'll see it. And you'll feel it. And you'll feel the weight on it. Well, as he's on the ground and he's being zapped with the taser, Deleo starts hitting him with the baton. You're going to hear testimony that a baton and a taser are designed as intermediate force weapons. They're designed to gain compliance. That is their purpose. They are designed to pause combat so that you can take someone into custody. That is the idea behind a taser and a baton. Well, there's a discrepancy. You'll see the video, make a judgment for yourself, whether Deleo hits him 19 times or 22 times. But it's either 19 or 22, approximately 20 strikes with the baton. And that's over about a 5-minute period. Later on, another deputy, Patrick Ponticello, shows up and he also deploys his taser and he gets him another 4 times. So we're talking about 8 tasers, zaps, 20 baton strikes. And that doesn't seem to get them under compliance to their level of what they think is appropriate. It should also be noted at this point, when they pulled him over, Butler was wearing like basketball shorts, jogging shorts. Well, when he's on the ground and he's punched in the face, blood starts coming out of him pretty good from the punch in the face. He's bleeding on himself. But somehow in the scuffle, his pants come off. So Butler's naked during this exchange. But as they're hitting him with the baton and zapping him with the taser, Deleo, towards the end, delivers 2 kicks to his face with his boot. That's after the batons, that's after the tasers, that's at the very end, kicks him twice with his boot. And then another deputy comes on scene, Deputy Carson, and immediately goes hands-on. Means he gets on top of him and gets him in handcuffs. You're going to see the video of the size differential of former Deputy Deleo, former Deputy McGinnis, and Chris Butler. You're going to see what happens when the third guy gets on scene, how he's taken into custody very, very quickly. All told, Butler ends up with a broken shoulder blade, broken elbow, broken nose, chipped teeth, and permanent facial scarring. And as a result of his injuries, you're going to hear Butler testify he has limited use of his arm. It's not the same as it was before, after the beating, after the interaction. We anticipate that you're going to hear from Trooper White, who is the initial officer to engage with the lights and sirens. Ramsey Boutte, the guy that filmed the video from the Daly's parking lot and from the car off the exit. Christopher Butler. And Lieutenant Russell, the SJSO, who put together the SJSO's investigation. And you're going to see the videos. You're going to watch the videos. And I ask you to pay careful attention to those videos. At the close of all the evidence, after you've heard all the testimony and after you've heard from all the witnesses and you've seen those videos and you've held that baton, the state has no doubt that we'll have proven this case beyond and to the exclusion of all reasonable doubt, and that you find Anthony Deleo guilty of aggravated battery. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hathaway. Mr. Shoemaker?
May it please the court.
You may proceed.
Good afternoon, everybody. December 29th, 2019, Trooper White starts his night like any other night, patrolling the I-95, keeping it safe. About 1 a.m, right around there. He runs into a car traveling anywhere from 5 miles an hour up to 30, up to 80 miles per hour as he's trying to pull him over. He's not going to be pulled over because he doesn't want to get stopped. He's not going to be pulled over because as the state just told you, he knows he's high on cough medicine because he's afraid he's going to go to jail. So as Trooper White follows him down the road with his lights on, pulls up alongside him, PA on, pull over, pull over, pull over. He just totally ignores him. And the first thing I want you to watch in the video is how the suspect's head pops up, turns around, looks in the rearview mirror, and then speeds up. Knowing that that law enforcement's trying to pull him over, knowing he's doing something, knowing that he shouldn't be out there. They get off 95. He turns west on 210, immediately running that red light, putting other drivers in jeopardy. Flies up the road. At some point, he gets up to speeds at 80 between 95 and getting off on 210, runs into another red light. He then is kind of forced into the parking lot at Winn-Dixie. There's 3 law enforcement cars. Mr. Batte's following, having a hoot, just giving us commentary on that, talking about it, pulls in, drives all the way to the back, and stops at a curb, just feet from a fence, a few more feet from a retention pond. And what I want you to notice, look at the car in the video and listen to Trooper White's testimony. He does not put the car in park. He does not turn the car off. Instead, Trooper White gets out, gun pulled, aiming it at him, says, "Put your hands out. Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands." All he does is open up the door. Deputy Deleo comes rushing in. I'm not going to get up here and argue whether or not he punched him right away or whether or not he did any of those acts. You watch the video, you be the judge of that. You'll see the video. But what you will know is that as Deputy Deleo is attempting to get him out of the vehicle, he's scratched, he's bleeding a little, he gets kicked in the knee. You will not see the kick based on the angle of the video, but you will hear testimony that he was kicked. You'll even hear a grunt by former Deputy Deleo as he turns and walks away, tries to walk off the paint. He comes back. At that point, former deputy, who retired, by the way, former Deputy McGinnis, is trying to yank him out of the car. Deputy Deleo aids him, tries to aid him, get him out of the vehicle. Two very large men cannot get him out of the vehicle. In fact, I believe Trooper White said he had a death grip on the steering wheel and was not going to come out. At that point, Deputy McGinnis, Deleo, they take a step back, and I believe it's anywhere from 10 to 15 seconds. They're not laying a hand on him. They're giving him commands. Get out of the vehicle. Get on the ground. Get on your stomach. Hands behind your back. He's sitting right there with a death grip still on the window or the wheel. Deputy McGinnis is able, how he does it, he gets behind the car door and is able to, I don't know if he gets him by surprise, he pushes him on the head and he falls out. When they have him on the ground, they're attempting to get handcuffs on. Now, you're going to hear everything about going hands-on, should have gone hands-on, but Deputy Deleo is already injured. He's been kicked, he's been scratched. You're also going to hear about Deputy McGinnis trying to put a VNR on the suspect, a neck restraint on the suspect. He gets bit. You're going to hear he's totally naked at one point, that he's sweaty, that he's bleeding some. But they tried to go hands-on, you'll see it, and they weren't able to get control of it. So while two very large men are trying to hold him down, get him in position to handcuff him, he stands right up, put him on his back. That's when Trooper White tases him. And you count how many tases, I believe it's 6 tases he actually got from Trooper White. Again, it's kind of iffy whether it's 4 or 6, but I believe it's 6. 6 different times he was tased. 6 different times he falls down. 6 different times 2 large men cannot get his hands in cuffs. So Deputy Deleo, he takes out his baton and he does strike. And he does strike him anywhere from 19 to 22 times. Again, you count. But look at where he's struck. Exactly where he's taught to strike during training. You'll hear that he has to go through training in order to utilize a baton, just like a person has to go through training in order to utilize a taser. We struck him 19 to 22 times. You'll see the red marks in the thigh and in the shoulder area, where he is taught to strike people. And on the force continuum, he is right where he's supposed to be with somebody that will not comply. In fact, the baton is less force, considered less force than the taser. So they're going back and forth, trying to get him up. Strike him with the baton. He stands up. He's tased. He falls down. Can't get him. Strike him with the baton. He stands up, falls down after he's tased. Can't get his arms. And this goes on for a long time. But what you also hear is that he was rolling around, trying to get those tasers out. And you'll also hear that another deputy shows up, Deputy Ponticello, and when he arrives, the suspect is on all fours, trying again to lift 2 very large men up, and he's going to tell you he came up and kicked him in the elbow. He's going to say, I kicked him in the elbow, hoping it would flatten him out, and we could get on top of him, because then he's on his stomach, we could get him in his hand, get the handcuffs on. Kicks him in the elbow with all of his weight on his arms and his knees, doesn't even budge him, doesn't even move. So it's after that, he then utilizes his taser. And it's important when you look at one of the tasers that Deputy Ponticello does, because he's on his knees and he's trying to get up, and he tases him and he falls face first, face plant, right into the cement. They do that. Deputy Ponicello tases them 4 times as they're trying to gain compliance or trying to get them handcuffed. Eventually, a 5th law enforcement officer shows up. Now, this does go on for roughly 7 minutes. The officers that are there are winded, they're tired, they're exhausted. 5th deputy shows up, aids them, able to get them in handcuffs. What I want you to pay attention to is when Deputy McGinnis says, okay, stop, I have him. Deputy Deleo is striking him with a baton where he's taught to. McGinnis says, I have him. Deputy Deleo stops. Automatically stops. Does not strike him one more time after that. Nobody yells at him after that. Nobody strikes him after that. Nobody does anything after that. They have him under control. They have him in handcuffs. The battle's over. Nobody hurt him again after that. Nobody touched him after that. Short time after that, you'll see a deputy on the video. They end up putting some grip restraints, they call it, leg restraints, put on his legs so he can't kick. You'll see a deputy standing on those restraints to hold him down. And he kicks, and the deputy goes flying, not flying, but gets knocked off him while he's standing on it about 190 pounds. That's how strong Mr. Butler was that day. Why? Because of the boatload of cold medicine he took. And like the state told you, he was on probation. And just like not stopping, it's because he wanted to hide what he was doing. Just like the resistance. He was on probation, he had urine tests, and he will tell you, I'm confident, he will tell you, he took that boatload of cold medicine to get high because he knew that if he tested positive for drugs, he'd be in trouble. 73 times you're going to hear. It's going to be hard to count them all. But 73 times law enforcement officers told him, get on your belly, put your hands behind your back, stop resisting. Let us get control. 73 times. He wasn't going to stop. And that's why we're here today. Not because Deputy Deleo did anything out of line, but because a person, as you'll see, was driving erratically, a person that's going to admit to being high in cough medicine, a person you're going to see that wouldn't comply, and a person that was not going to go down easy. That's why we're here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. State, you may call your first witness.
So you would call Trooper Timothy White.
All right, so we could go ahead and have Mr. White come into the courtroom. Is he outside?
White out there?
All right, good afternoon, sir. If you'll approach the podium, come over to Madam Clerk so we can administer an oath to you, please. Come on over, you can come a little closer. There you go. And if you pause and raise your right hand, please, Madam Clerk. All right, sir, if you'll come on over here and have a seat in our witness stand. Make yourself comfortable. Try to speak into that microphone as much as you can and just try to keep your voice up nice and loud, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. State your witness.
Good afternoon, Trooper.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name
Timothy White
and where are you currently employed?
with Florida Highway Patrol,
How long have you been with the Florida Highway Patrol?
8 years.
What is your current assignment?
I'm a road trooper. I work the road.
Okay, and are you assigned here to St. Johns County?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that the same assignment you had in December of 2019?
Yes.
And what shift do you work?
It varies. At that time, I was working the midnight shift, which would be the 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift.
Okay. And that's what shift you're currently on as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you working last night?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we've got you a little tired, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Could you please tell the jury about some of your training and experience?
I went to the Florida Highway Patrol Training Academy in Tallahassee, Florida in 2013. It's a 6-month course. During that time, we get various training from traffic stops, DUI detection, defensive tactics, legal. We're trained with taser training and other various aspects of law enforcement.
Were you on duty on December 29th, 2019 around 1 a.m.?
Yes, ma'am.
Where were you patrolling that early morning?
Interstate 95 northbound. At that time, I was around between International Golf Parkway and County Road 210.
What do you see as you're in that area?
As I'm patrolling northbound, I'm in the left lane of the interstate. I'm around the 326, 327 mile marker. As I'm driving north, there's very little traffic. I see a red vehicle in the left lane, short distance ahead of me. Immediately, the vehicle quickly veers to the left shoulder and stops. At that point, I'm thinking the vehicle is either breaking down, having some kind of issues. So I continue northbound with my intent of pulling behind the vehicle, checking on the driver, seeing what his status was.
And what happens as you pull in to check on the vehicle?
As I get closer to the vehicle, I start to go off onto the shoulder. The vehicle pulls back into the left lane directly in front of me. At that point, he continues in the left lane in front of me, and he's traveling at about 10 miles per hour.
Does his speed increase at all?
Not initially, but after a short period, he accelerates to about 30 miles per hour.
About how long is he going 30 miles an hour?
Just another minute or so.
What's your concern at this point?
At that point, I observe his car. It's weaving within the lane. It's drifting off onto the shoulder. So based on my training, I either think that the driver is either sick, falling asleep, fatigued, or possibly under the influence of something.
So do you initiate a traffic stop?
Yes, I do.
How do you do that?
At that point, I turn on my emergency equipment, my blue lights, trying to signal the driver to pull over so that I could check his welfare and see what the issue is.
I assume you're driving a standard marked Florida Highway Patrol car that we're all used to seeing.
Yes, the black and tan.
Does the vehicle stop right away?
No, it doesn't. It continues northbound. Again, my lights are activated. I'm directly behind the vehicle. As I mentioned a minute ago, he accelerated to about 30 miles per hour, still in the left lane, directly in front of me, drifting. At that point, I activate my sirens, thinking that maybe some people just aren't aware of their surroundings. So I turn on my siren, thinking that maybe that would get his attention and he'd pull over. But he still doesn't, still doing about 30 miles per hour.
So what do you do next?
At that point, he still hasn't stopped. I radio into our dispatch center that I have a vehicle that's not stopping. I pull up next to the passenger side of the vehicle, still on the interstate. He's still doing about 30 miles per hour. Pull up next to the vehicle, trying to get his attention. I look over to my left. I see a white male driver. He glances over at me and just looks straight back ahead, still doing about 30 miles per hour. I get on my PA, my public announce speaker, and make the announcement to him, pull over. And it's loud, so we should have been able to hear that. Still doesn't pull over. Get back behind him. Still lights and sirens going. Give him another opportunity. Announce again, pull over. He still doesn't pull over, and he's continuing northbound.
Does he stay on I-95 the entire time?
After I tell him a couple times on my public address system to pull over, he's still going northbound. He accelerates to about 80 miles per hour. He's still in the left lane, still weaving. He gets up to right where the exit is of County Road 210, which is the 329 mile marker northbound. He's still in the left lane. I'm still directly behind him. As he's going past the exit, he goes directly from the left lane across the other 2 lanes of northbound traffic and off onto the exit, onto the ramp.
Ultimately, where does this vehicle go to stop?
The vehicle finally stops in the Winn-Dixie parking lot off of County Road 210.
And he runs 2 red lights on the way to the Winn-Dixie parking lot.
Yes.
Can you describe that shopping center for the jury?
It's a fairly large parking lot. It has several islands with concrete islands in it. There was no vehicles in it that time of night. There's several different lanes of traffic.
What businesses are in that immediate area?
There's a couple other businesses next to the Winn-Dixie, but I'm not sure what they are. And there's a I believe it's a Shell gas station that's directly kind of in the corner of the parking lot.
Is that in St. Johns County, this parking lot area?
Yes.
Now, at any point in time, do any other law enforcement officers join for backup?
Yes. At that point, I know of 2 St. Johns County deputies that arrived.
And who are those deputies?
That would have been Deputy Deleo and Deputy McGinnis.
Do you see Anthony Deleo here in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
Could you please identify him by an article of clothing?
He's wearing a blue business suit.
Judge, let the record reflect that the trooper has identified the defendant.
Which blue business suit? There's 2
With the
individuals.
light blue tie. Second one from the.
All right. The record will reflect that the witness has identified the defendant in this case.
Had you worked with those 2 deputies previously?
Yes, ma'am, on numerous occasions.
Now, what happens when the car stops?
As soon as the car stops, I'm directly behind the vehicle. It stops against a concrete raised curb at the edge of the parking lot. Directly in front of that is a chain link fence. On the other side of that fence is a retention pond. The car bumps up against the curb. I immediately put my car in park, get out of my car, draw my weapon, and I start giving verbal commands to the driver to show me his hands.
About how long is he given a chance to get out on his own or comply on his own?
I would say it was probably 2 or 3 seconds.
So pretty quickly, you and Mr. Deleo are out the door.
Yes.
How is, and we later learned that the individual driving the vehicle is a white male by the name of Christopher Butler. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. How is Mr. Butler resisting getting out of the vehicle?
When we initially went up to the vehicle, he was sitting in the driver's seat. His hands were firmly on the steering wheel, and he was making some moaning sounds and just other noises, but he was just had a firm grip on the steering wheel.
And you can see both hands on the steering wheel.
Yes.
Is he punching or biting or kicking anyone at this point?
At that point, no, he's not.
Once he's ultimately removed from the vehicle, what happens?
Once he's removed from the vehicle, he's still not, at that point, he's not complying with commands. We're telling him to stay on the ground, put your hands behind your back so we can handcuff him, take him into custody. He's still just not complying.
Do you stay in that same space?
After that, prior to him getting out of the vehicle, Deputy McGinnis had come up to the door as well. At that point, they're two large individuals. There was not enough space for me to be in there with them. So I made the decision to back up. I backed up probably 10 to 15 feet, drew my taser, made the announcement to the other deputies that I had the taser. Then they were able to remove him from the vehicle. And at that point, he was still not complying.
What is a taser?
A taser is a electrical device that's used to obtain what's called NMI, neuromuscular incapacitation. It's an intermediate weapon, which means that it's not a lethal weapon, and it's used to just incapacitate a subject long enough to take him into custody.
And are you trained in how to utilize a taser properly?
Yes, I am.
Let me ask you this. Are you supposed to just use the taser? You said to temporarily incapacitate somebody so that you can take them into custody. What do you mean by that?
When you deploy the taser, the prongs go into the skin of the subject. It creates a circuit. When the trigger's pulled, electricity goes through that circuit, and the cycle lasts for 5 seconds. During that 5-second period, that's when you obtain the NMI. That's where you see the muscles lock up. People fall. That's when you have true NMI. Is when you see them, their muscles lock up, and they're basically can't move for that 5-second period.
So when they can't move for that 5-second period, what does your training tell you that you or somebody else should be doing?
At that point, if possible, you should be trying to restrain the subject, handcuffs or whatever the situation requires at that time.
Where do your taser probes land on Mr. Butler?
In his back. I believe it was upper back and buttocks area.
Do you recall exactly how many times you deployed your taser?
I believe it was 4 times.
And obviously there's video of it. So if it was 4 to 6, does that sound accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Does your taser eventually run out of power?
It doesn't run out of power, but it does. As I mentioned before, once the probes are in, if one of those probes come out, the line breaks, you're not going to be able to get that circuit. So at one point during this incident, I believe one of my probes did come out, or the line broke, so I wasn't getting a full contact.
What are the other officers on scene doing during this period of time?
We're all giving verbal commands. Again, lay down, put your hands behind your back. They're trying to basically use force to get him to comply. He was still trying to get up, still resisting.
What is Mr. Butler doing or wearing when he first comes out of the vehicle?
When he first comes out, I believe he had no shirt, and I believe it was black sweatpants.
Pretty quickly, does he end up naked?
Yes, he does.
So is it fair to say at this point we know he doesn't have a weapon?
True.
How is Mr. Deleo trying to get him to comply with commands?
At first, he was just trying to grab him, trying to get hold of him. He did strike him a couple times.
What do you mean by strike?
There were a couple of, I don't know if they were open hand, closed hand, but there were a couple of strikes, trying to get him to comply. And then at one point, Mr. Deleo walks away and comes back with a baton, his asp baton.
Do you see him use that asp on Mr. Butler?
Yes, I do.
How much?
Several times.
Did you ever go hands-on in an attempt to try and detain Mr. Butler?
No, I did not. I was just standing back, still had my taser deployed in case I need to activate another cycle.
Okay. How tall are you?
I'm 5'6",
About how much did you weigh back in December of 2019?
probably 160 pounds.
So is it fair to say that former Deputy McGinnis and former Deputy Deleo are significantly bigger than you?
Yes, they are.
How are you feeling while you're watching Mr. Deleo's interaction with Mr. Butler?
At that point, I'm wanting Mr. Butler to comply. Because he's still resisting. He's still not complying with commands. I feel a little concerned for him, to be honest.
For Mr. Butler?
For Mr. Butler.
Now, you're one of the three people primarily in this situation. At the time being in this situation, and I recognize I'm asking you a difficult question as a law enforcement officer. But did you feel like at the time it went overboard?
Your Honor, that calls for ultimate conclusion of the province to adjourn.
Rephrase your question.
How are you feeling when you're standing in this situation watching it?
Your Honor, same objection.
Overruled.
I feel at times, I was feeling at times that it could have been a little excessive, based on FHP policy. It would have been considered a little excessive, the number of strikes.
Are you equipped with any kind of body camera?
No, I don't have body camera.
What about video system in your cars?
Yes, we have a video recording device in our cars.
How does that in-car camera system work?
The in-car camera system is connected to our emergency lights and siren equipment. As soon as our lights and sirens are turned on, the camera automatically turns on. We don't physically have to turn it on. And then it basically, it's always recording, but it'll record over itself. So that gives it an opportunity. Once the lights are turned on, it actually records 30 seconds before your lights are turned on. So you actually get a 30-second period before you even turn your lights on. So it comes on automatically when you turn on the switch for your emergency equipment.
And how many different cameras are positioned in your car?
There's 4 around the outside, 1 in the front, 1 in the back, and 1 on each side. And then there's a camera for the back seat.
Was there a recording from your car that early morning with the interactions with Mr. Butler?
Yes, there was.
Judge, permission to approach the witness.
You may.
Trooper, I'm handing you what's been pre-marked for identification as State's Exhibit K. Do you recognize that CD?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize it?
It has my initials on it.
Okay, and what's contained on that CD?
That would be my in-dash video, my in-car video.
Is this a fair and accurate recording of the incident with Christopher Butler the early morning of December 29th, 2019?
Yes.
Judge, permission to move into evidence what's been pre-marked for identification as State's K.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
What was previously marked for identification as State's Exhibit K will be received into evidence as State's Exhibit number 1.
When all is said and done, what kind of observations did you make of Mr. Butler?
talking about everything he was in custody after that.
And what's he look like at that point?
He looked like he'd been in a fight. He was, had significant, what appeared to be, marks and bruises and, injuries.
There's permission to approach the witness again.
You may.
Handing you a packet of photographs that have been pre-marked for identification as States Exhibit A1 through A22. You take a look through those. Do you recognize those photos?
Yes, ma'am.
And what are they photos of?
There would be photos of the scene from that night.
Are they a fair and accurate depiction of the scene on December 29th of 2019?
Yes, they are.
Judge, a state at this time would move into evidence what's been pre-marked for identification as States Exhibit A1 through A22.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
That'd be received as a composite exhibit number 2.
Judge, permission to publish electronically to the jury.
You may.
For the record, I'm showing A1. Publishing A2. Publishing A3. A4. A5. A6. A7. A8. A9. A10. A11. 12. 13. 14. 15. 16. 17. 18. 19. 20. 21. And 22. You have just a moment, Judge.
May.
I don't have any further questions at this time for Trooper White.
All right, cross-examination.
Roy, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This was your stop, was it not?
Yes, sir.
All right. You're the one that initiated the traffic stop on 95, right?
Yes.
And how many lights did the suspect run while you were chasing him?
2 traffic lights.
2 traffic lights. How many vehicles were on the road during that time frame?
On which
On
road?
210, well, let's say on 95 and then on 210,
It was light traffic.
light traffic, but there were other vehicles around?
Yes.
Okay. Was he creating a hazard to other traffic?
I would believe so at that time.
All right. So he veers all the way from the left lane at approximately 80 miles an hour, then all the way to the right and gets off the exit.
Yes.
Did you take that as an evasive maneuver?
Yes, I did.
So you follow him up the 210 exit, and then that's the red light. The first red light he runs is right there as you get off 210 and head westbound on, I'm sorry, head westbound on 210, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then he's going up there. You still have your lights and siren on?
Yes, they're
All right.
still activated.
And then he runs another red light up there a little ways.
Yes, he did.
Other vehicles are around, maybe not heavy, but other vehicles are in the area.
Yes, there were few other vehicles on the roadway.
And then as you approach the Winn-Dixie parking lot, is that when you see Mr. Deleo's vehicle come off the median and turn onto 210?
I wasn't sure who was driving which vehicle, but there was a St. John's vehicle that came across. Yes.
So you see the vehicle come off the median and kind of get to the side of the suspect.
Yes, correct.
And at that point, shortly thereafter, the suspect veers into the Winn-Dixie parking lot, right?
Yes.
All right. Now, there's many parking spots in that area because you said there wasn't many vehicles parked in the parking lot, right?
Correct.
Would have been very easy for him to pick any one of those spots right there, couldn't he?
Yes.
Instead, he drives all the way to the end of the entrance, or the entrance road. He drives all the way to the store front and then turns left, right?
Correct.
And then he keeps going all the way down there. Now, it's not at a high rate of speed, but you're still following him with lights on. And how many SJSO vehicles are in the parking lot at that point?
I was only concerned about his vehicle, so I couldn't really tell you how many other deputies were.
Well, how many deputies were there as soon as you stopped?
I would assume 2,
Two others?
at least 2.
So their vehicles had to be close by, right?
Yes.
Okay. So he pulls up, hits the curb, and the car comes to a stop.
Yes.
At some point, you have to physically go in, turn the car off and put it in park, don't you?
Correct. Yes.
He never turned his car off, did he?
No, he didn't.
He never put it in park, did he?
No, he didn't.
Would you be concerned with that as a law enforcement officer coming up to somebody who has refused to pull over? If their car is still in gear and you can take off?
Yes, was my concern. That's why eventually I turned the car off and put it in park.
And it's very easy for someone to put it in reverse and ram into you, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay. So you jump out of the car, pull your weapon, your service weapon, and you start giving commands, right?
Yes.
He does not comply, does he?
No, he doesn't.
All right. The door opens up. He does open up the door though, doesn't he?
Yes, the door does open.
Does that concern you that you have somebody that's fleeing and eluding you, that all of a sudden they're getting out of the car and not showing their hands when you told them to?
Yes, that is a concern.
Because he might come out with a weapon, right?
Correct.
He might have who knows what and come out and use it against you, right?
Correct.
All right. So Deputy Mr. Deleo comes charging up to the car and make initial contact with your suspect, right?
Yes.
And Deputy Deleo is in there trying to grab him, get a hold of him, but he doesn't have any luck, does he?
No, he doesn't.
All right. And you saw the picture of Mr. Deleo's arm. He had that scratch on him. Did he get that scratch then? Do you know?
I don't know when he would have received that.
All right, but it would have been during the altercation, correct?
At some point, yes.
All right. So Deputy Deleo is wrestling, trying to get a hold of the guy and pull him out. And at some point, Deputy McGinnis comes up and then tries to aid him. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
That's when you see Mr. Deleo turn and walk away. Do you remember that? He
yes,
disengages?
shortly after that, that's when he disengages and walks out of camera.
Okay. All right. And at that time, McGinnis is then trying to get him out of the vehicle, right?
If I remember correctly, yes.
And at that point, you don't go and offer hands-on and help him get him out of the vehicle, do you?
No, I don't.
And you said before you backed up like 5 to 10 feet or 15 feet, something like that. But when you backed up, didn't it kind of obscure your angle a little so that you couldn't see everything on the other side of the car?
That's correct. At some points, my view was obstructed.
Okay. And so you don't know if Mr. Deleo got scratched at that point because you can't really see well, right?
Correct. I don't know when that would occur.
And you don't know whether or not Deputy Deleo was kicked at that point because, again, you can't see well, can you?
Correct. I didn't see it that point.
Now, there is a time, and it's about maybe 7 to 10 seconds, something like that, that you're standing kind of at the back of the vehicle. Deputy Deleo and McGinnis are standing at the door, and all three of you are yelling commands for him to get out, but nobody's touching him, right?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. And he doesn't get out of the vehicle, does he?
No, he doesn't.
He continues holding onto the wheel, resisting getting out, doesn't he?
Yes.
At that point, Deputy McGinnis is able to get a good enough grip to push him out the door. And he's on the ground then, right?
I don't recall who actually got him out of the car, but then he was out of the car, yes.
And do you remember Deputy McGinnis attempting to put a neck restraint on him?
No, I don't recall that.
Okay. Do you recall Deputy McGinnis getting bit?
I didn't see it, but I remember him mentioning that after the incident was over.
Okay. Well, while he's on the ground at that point, does he not then stand up while McGinnis and Mr. Deleo are on top of him? Doesn't he stand up and start walking away?
Eventually he does. I don't know if that's that exact moment, but eventually he does start walking towards the front of his car.
And you tase him, right?
Yes.
And he falls straight back.
Correct.
All right. Nothing to stop him. He just falls straight back onto his back.
I believe he went against the car.
And then rolled over.
Yes.
All right. Now, when you tase somebody, you do it for, I think you said 5-second intervals is how long it lasts.
Yes.
And for every one of those intervals, how many volts is going through the person?
I don't know.
Okay. Would you say that on 4 tases, and it's between 4 and 6 tases, but 4 tases, that'd be a total of 20 seconds of tasing?
Yes.
All right. And that would be roughly 200,000 volts to go through them?
I don't know the exact voltage.
Okay. All right. When a person is getting tased, you stated earlier that you're supposed to get them, when they're tased, they lose their neuromuscular ability to move, but you can't grab onto them at that point, can you?
Personally, no, I couldn't. I was
Well-
not right.
A person that is there to help you, assist you, you can't grab onto him while he's getting actually jolted with the volts, can you? Because you could get tased.
Yes, you can.
So you have to wait until he's done with the cycle before you can actually then go hands-on, right?
No, that's not correct. While they're being tased, you can actually, as long as you don't touch the wires and you go around wires, you can handcuff or take control of the subject while they're being tased.
But it makes it a little more difficult, doesn't it?
It does, but that's the way it basically works.
And then once the tasing would stop, the suspect would try to get up again, wouldn't he?
Yes.
And the three of you constantly were saying, get on the ground, get on your stomach, hands behind your back. And he never did that, did he?
No, he didn't.
Did you ever hear him claim to be Jesus Christ?
I didn't hear him specifically say that, but I did hear a lot of moaning and just incoherent, basically mumbling.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Giving you what was your transcript of the interview between you and Lieutenant Long. Do you remember doing that back on January 15th?
Yes, I do.
And you gave an interview about the whole incident from that night, correct?
Yes.
All right. Could you go to page 32 of that interview? And let's go to the 31 at first, and I want you to read this to yourself. And Mr. Long, he swore you in that day and asked you to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, right?
After it was completed, yes, he did.
Yep. All right. And I want you to read this to yourself from page 31, line 25. Go to page 32, line 3. Can you read that to yourself? All right. And Lieutenant Long had said, did you ever hear him call himself Jesus Christ? And what was your response?
I said it sounded at one point like I heard that come out of his mouth.
So you did hear him call himself Jesus Christ, didn't you?
Well, I heard him say something, but I didn't specifically know exactly what he said.
Right. And then during but you heard reference to Jesus Christ come out of his mouth, did you not?
What sounded somewhat like that, yes.
Okay. All right. You stated at some point one of your leads came out or broke out from your taser?
Yes, toward the end of the encounter.
All right. And while you had the taser wires in him and you were hitting him with the taser, did you ever see him rolling around in an attempt to get away or anything? What appeared to be an attempt to get away?
He was doing a lot of movement, but I don't really know. The only time that I would really think that he was trying to get away was when he started walking towards the front of his car.
Okay. And that's when you tased him?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So at some point, Deputy Deleo gets his baton out and he strikes him a number of times and then he stops, does he not? Puts the baton, hits him, strikes him with the baton and then puts it away, right?
I don't recall him putting it away.
Well, he wasn't using it anymore at that point, was he?
The video would probably show that better than my
Right.
memory.
But do you remember him striking him 22 consecutive times at one particular time and then not striking anymore, or was it multiple times throughout the 7 minutes that you guys were trying to get him to comply?
I remember it was several different, basically phases. I mean, it wasn't
Just
constant-
22 rapid
constant
fire.
strikes. No.
Okay, so, and I just want it, kind of the way it would go is he would try to stand up or do something, and then you would tase him, right?
Yes.
And then when he was down and Deputy McGinnis would try to gain control of his arms or something like that, but he wasn't able to, right?
Yeah.
And then Deputy Deleo would strike him with the baton a number of times, and then he would stop, right?
Yes.
And then he'd try to get up and get away, and you'd hit him with the taser again, right?
That's fairly correct. Yes.
And that went on and on and on, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So as you're going on, and did you ever, you stated that you felt like maybe it was excessive. Ever during this video, are we going to hear you say, hey guys, enough, stop?
No, you're not.
Are we ever going to see you go in and go hands on yourself and say, I got him, let me take it over?
No.
No, that's because in the heat of the moment, you were doing what you could to get control of a person that was resisting you, right?
Correct.
So it's only after the fact that you look back, you go, oh, maybe we could have done something else.
Correct.
Right, but at that particular moment, you weren't concerned, were you?
I was slightly concerned, but I felt like they had control, like they basically, in lack of better words, knew what they were doing.
Okay. And then another deputy, Ponicello, comes up. And then that's at about the time that your taser's no longer having any effect on the suspect, right?
Correct.
And did you see Deputy Ponicello kick the suspect?
I don't recall that.
Okay. After that, do you see the suspect still trying to get up?
At that point, I don't recall.
Okay. At some point, does Deputy Ponicello then tase him?
Yes, he does.
And Deputy Ponicello tased him, I believe, 4 times. Isn't that correct?
I don't know the number of
Okay.
cases.
All right. And at that point, a 5th law enforcement officer, Deputy Carson, comes up and helps in getting him handcuffed, right?
I believe so, yes.
And this went on for about 7 minutes, I believe, correct?
The entire incident?
Yeah. Not from the time you started following him, but getting him, trying to get him out of the vehicle.
I don't know the exact time frame, but it was approximately that. Yeah.
Okay. Were you tired?
Yes, I was.
Were Deputy Deleo, was he exhausted? Did he look exhausted?
They appeared tired. Yes.
Deputy McGinnis, did he look exhausted?
Yes.
So it was kind of nice to have 2 fresh bodies to come in and help out, right?
Yes.
And just to go back, you stated that initially he had some jogging pants on when he first came out of the car?
I believe that's what it was. It was either like jogging pants or sweatpants.
And then he
some
took-
type of loose fitting type pants.
And then he took those off?
Yes, he did.
So you have a man that's totally naked on the ground, right?
Yes.
Was he sweating?
Yes, he was.
Did he have some blood from the initial contact in the vehicle?
I didn't see. I wouldn't know.
Did you notice whether you thought he was sweating excessively?
He was sweating pretty good.
Was he pretty slick?
He was, yeah.
Right, because originally you did reach in and try to grab him when he was in the car, right?
Yes, he did.
And was he slick, hard to get a hold of?
Yes, he was.
And the entire time that this was going on, the 3 of you were constantly yelling, put your hands behind your back, stop resisting, get on your stomach, weren't you?
Yes, we were.
Now, at some point when Deputy Carson is able to help Deputy McGinnis get him handcuffed, just before that, doesn't Deputy McGinnis like, stop, I have him, stop. And doesn't all of that chaos stop at that moment?
Yes, when all the other deputies arrived, is pretty much when everything pretty much
And
came to an end.
And once the suspect was handcuffed and on the ground, not one person touched him, did they?
I don't know at that point.
You didn't see anybody hit him, did you?
Touched him as in,
I mean, strike him, kick him, do anything to him once he was under control.
not that I saw.
All right. And you didn't strike him or hit him or do anything, did you?
No.
In fact, you started, processing paperwork and searching the vehicle and doing all that stuff, right?
That's correct.
In fact, nobody was yelling at him anymore, were they?
No, they weren't.
So as soon as he was under control, the whole episode was basically over, right?
Yes.
May I have 1 second, Ron?
You may.
Also, as far as the weather that night, it was raining some that night, wasn't it?
It was light rain, yes.
So the water on him would make him even more slick. Wouldn't you agree?
It's possible.
And do you utilize a baton?
I have one, but I've never used it.
Okay. Have you gone through training in order to use it?
Yes, ma'am.
And are you taught to strike them in the thigh area with the baton?
Yes,
And kind of in the shoulder area because there's more muscle up there?
yes.
And isn't that where Mr. Deleo was striking him?
I wasn't seeing exactly where he was striking him.
May I approach you?
Man.
Showing you what's been introduced as states 2B. You stated you recognize that photo earlier.
Yes.
Where do you see red marks on the suspect?
From that photograph, appears to be the back, shoulder, thigh area.
All right. Right where you're taught to strike somebody with a baton?
Yes.
I have nothing further. Your Honor.
Can you redirect? All right.
Trooper, how quickly does this incident get physical and physical force is used?
Almost immediately once the car stopped.
Okay. Is it fair to say there's at least 4 baton strikes before your first taser deployment?
I believe so. I don't recall the number, but yes.
Ultimately, this cycle of tasing and baton strikes, was it working?
It didn't seem to be working very well.
And every single time the taser was deployed or Mr. Deleo used the baton, was there an attempt to secure him?
No, there wasn't.
Now, while you don't intervene in what Mr. McGinnis and Mr. Deleo are doing, is it your testimony that as this is happening, before you've watched any of the video, you had concerns about the use of force that was being used?
Yes, I did.
And would you agree that the video is probably the best evidence of this event?
Yes, it would be.
I don't have any other questions.
All right. Anything else?
Just quickly, Your Honor. Roy, you stated that the state of the vehicle being in park, not being in park and still running was a concern to you?
Yes, it would have been.
All right. Would you consider a vehicle a dangerous weapon at times if used accordingly?
It can be, yes.
So would it have been important to get control of that dangerous weapon immediately?
Yes, it would.
Okay, nothing else.
All right. May this witness be excused?
Yes,
All right. Thank you. You are free to go, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been going for a little while. It's a good time for an afternoon break. I think what I'll do is just let you go back down to the second floor. This is a little bit cramped at times, so you can spread out a little bit. We'll just take about 15 minutes and then we'll come back for our next witness. You can leave your notepads here in the courtroom. Just put them face down and just leave them on your chairs. Once again, just as a reminder, please don't talk about the case among yourselves. Don't talk about it with anyone else, and don't allow anyone else to speak about it in your presence. And you are excused to go downstairs. Jury has exited the courtroom. It's almost 3:15. We'll be back at 3:30. Any matters we need to address? All right. We'll be in recess.
I don't know. I think we can take it out if you're doing class.
Spencer.
I was going to.
He said, as long as you stay out.
I didn't want to get.
Don't go off. I came close. I'm like,
Yeah, dying. Yeah, yeah. It can be rough. Can be rough. Why didn't you notice? One second. What's up? So he's coming up next? Huh? He's coming up next? Yeah. He's in jail. For what now? What's he doing now? Don't touch, don't touch, don't touch. Adrian. Yeah, I think there's a line. Is this yours? Yeah, that's mine. Okay. Yeah, that's mine. Yeah, that's mine. Okay. I'm trying to go to the downstairs. That's her phone. It's a little birdie. 10-9. I got it, Tracy. Thank you. No. Go back there. Greg, go to the Zoom, the one next to it.
Is this on?
All right, let's go back on the record on case 2000 CF 978. We are ready to resume our trial. Let's see, the next witness is ready to testify, and this is Mr. Butler.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, and Mr. Butler is currently in custody of the Florida State Prison System. Is that correct?
Yes, Judge.
And he is going to be testifying from the witness stand, and he will remain, his devices, his shackles will remain on during his testimony.
Yes, Judge, and we had talked to the courtroom deputies. There is one point that we want him to be able to demonstrate the range of motion with his arm, and I believe the deputies are okay with that for that particular time frame to remove his handcuffs.
Sure. Okay, we'll do that. All right, so we'll just keep you a handcuff for the time being. When the time is right, and we'll take that off, then you'll be allowed to move your arm to show the truth. Okay?
Yes, sir, no problem, Judge.
All right. All right. Any other matters we need to address before we bring our jury back up? Let's go ahead and get the jury up here if they're not already up.
Judge, the only thing would be, I mean, obviously he's shackled, he's taking the stand now. He would be the last witness for the day. Are we able to send, I recognize that it doesn't make too big of a difference.
Sure.
So I understand the court's ruling one way or another, but are we able to send the jury out before he
Yes.
gets back into custody?
Yes, I'll do that.
Thank you, Judge.
That's only fair. So I will, once his testimony, you can just let, in front of the jury, just let us know that that's the last witness for today, and I'll let them know that we're going to recess until tomorrow morning. Probably have them come back around 8:30 so that we can get started by 8:45. We'll have witnesses ready to go by 8:45 tomorrow.
We will, Judge.
All right. You'll have witnesses ready to go if the state rests tomorrow.
Yes, Your Honor.
Very good. And will you be using the audio visual for this witness at all?
Yes, Judge, I just need to publish 2 photographs.
Okay,
And I think I have it queued up.
that's fine. You may have to re-queue it because I probably started it back with the video. Because just so you all are aware, whenever you turn that on, it actually turns off the video feed so that when I'm actually showing this to the public, they can't see anything other than just a blank screen. And so I just have to, unless you're actually using it at those times, we don't have a choice. But other than that, I'm going to try to turn it back onto our video feed from inside the courtroom so that we are able to just,
It's just 2
Give it
photos
full access.
and
No
then I'll be done with the system for now.
okay. All right, let's go ahead and bring them out. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You can go ahead and take your seats when you're ready, and everyone else in the courtroom, you may be seated at this time. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to resume our trial. We have one more witness for today. Once this witness has finished testifying, I'm going to excuse you for the day. I'm going to ask that you all come back tomorrow morning at about 8:30. If you all can go back to that second floor jury room. Try to be there by 8:30, then we'll try to get you all up here, get started with trial by 8:45 tomorrow. Okay? With that, State, you may call your next witness.
Jury State would call Christopher Butler.
All right, Mr. Butler has already taken the witness stand. Madam Clerk, can we administer an oath to Mr. Butler, please?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Mr. Butler, if you would just try to speak into that microphone as much as you can, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. State, you may proceed.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi, my name is Christopher Butler,
Mr. Butler, how old are you?
32,
And how tall are you?
5'7".
Back in December of 2019, about how much did you weigh?
170-ish.
Okay. Obviously, you're currently in custody. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Does that have to do with this particular incident as well as a violation of probation from Lake County?
Yes, ma'am.
At the time of this incident, were you on probation?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you been made any promises to testify in this case?
No, ma'am.
Do you have any pending cases that you still need to be sentenced on?
No, ma'am.
So this particular incident where you were driving and fled from law enforcement, you've already pled to that case and you've been sentenced, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you were sentenced in your violation of probation case as well, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever been convicted of a felony?
The one now and the one I was on probation for.
Okay, so how many times total? How many felonies?
3,
And what was your sentence from this case?
20.25 months.
And you could have gotten up to 15 years?
I believe they made a F3 instead of a F2, so it went to 5 years.
Okay. Was I ever your prosecutor on that case?
No, ma'am.
So have you ever had any involvement with me other than this case in which you're the listed victim for?
No, ma'am.
Now, I want to take you back to December 28th and 29th of 2019. Where were you living then?
With my mother,
In what city?
St. Augustine.
Okay. What were you doing the day of December 28th?
Running all the kids around.
Where?
Out in 210, a piece of acreage my girlfriend's grandparents owned.
Okay. And what were you guys doing out there?
Fishing, go-karts, building fires for s'mores, climbing trees repeatedly to get boomerangs out of trees, things of that nature.
Were you sick that day?
Yes, ma'am.
What kind of ailment or illness did you have?
I don't know, my mom came home with something about 2 weeks prior and gave me something that was pretty nasty.
Okay. So some kind of a cold.
Yes, ma'am.
Were you taking any medication?
Yes, ma'am.
What kind of medication were you taking?
Quercetin, Robitussin, and Theraflu.
Okay. How much of it did you take?
Enough to get the cold away.
Okay.
Enough to get the cold away.
Is it fair to say that you took more than you were supposed to?
Yes, ma'am.
Was that intentional?
That night? Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you were doing it to get high? Is that a fair statement?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Were you aware that that kind of medication wouldn't show up on a drug test for probation?
I already had a urinalysis for that month. I figured I was in the clear.
Okay. Did you also drink any alcohol that day?
Early that morning.
Were you out driving around 1 a.m. on December 29th?
Yes, ma'am.
Where were you going?
Back to 210. I had left some of my kids' clothing, fishing poles, things like that.
Should you have been driving that night?
Against better judgment, no, ma'am.
Fair to say if you could go back and do it all again, you would have never gotten in the car.
Yeah, I should have stayed home.
Do you remember all of the details of that night?
No, ma'am.
Do you remember law enforcement trying to pull you over?
Yes, ma'am.
So you saw the lights and sirens and saw Florida Highway Patrolman try to pull you over?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you pull over right away?
No, ma'am.
Why not?
I wanted to proceed to a safe location so my girlfriend could get her car.
Okay. Where did you drive to?
Off of 95. I was at the 210 exit, so I proceeded off and went around the corner to the Winn-Dixie where the Dailies was.
Why'd you go to the Dailies?
That's where my girlfriend worked.
Okay. Whose car were you driving that night?
My girlfriend's. She was parked behind me at the time. It was easier to get her car.
Is it safe to say you knew you were probably going to get arrested that night?
Fair chance, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you were concerned about leaving your girlfriend's car on 95.
Yes, ma'am.
Once you finally pull over, what do you remember when the door opens?
Officers with either guns or tasers in their hand moving towards the car.
Did you have your seatbelt on at that point in time?
Yes, ma'am.
What do you remember next?
Being struck in the face and hit and grabbed and choked while I was in the car.
Okay. Were you able to see the individual that punched you in the face?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you see him in the courtroom today?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you please describe him by an article of clothing? I know there's two gentlemen wearing similar items over there, but
A nice light blue tie and a bald head.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that the witness has identified Mr. Deleo.
The witness has identified the defendant.
Were you trying to tell law enforcement anything as they're trying to get you out of the car?
I was attempted to. I was kind of scared. I didn't know if it was guns or tasers, and I've never been successful with law enforcement.
Do you remember being tased that night?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. At any point in time, were you trying to pull the taser out?
I set up because it was kind of foggy with my recollection wasn't real well. And when I set up, I realized like I had fishing line or something in my hand, and I realized I had something in me. So when I pulled it out,
So you intentionally pulled the taser out?
yes, ma'am.
Do you remember it being kicked at all?
Yes, ma'am.
What do you remember about that?
I remember trying to protect my face and my head from multiple strikes, and then I remember being kicked dead force in my nose and my mouth.
And what were you kicked by?
A boot.
Were you hit with anything else that night?
Batons.
How many times did it feel like you were hit with a baton?
50-ish.
Now, you already testified that you don't remember all of the details of what happened that night. Is what the jury will eventually see on video. Is that probably the best evidence?
Yes, ma'am.
What's the next thing you remember in this
Um,
incident?
A loud popping incident from being tased. I tried to roll on my stomach to surrender, and they wouldn't let me. They tased me again and hit me with batons. And then there was a loud popping, and where I remember very much, I remember being wrapped in something blue in an ambulance. And I remember waking up 2 days later being told I didn't went to first appearance, and I had no recollection of talking to a judge or nothing.
Do you know what hospital you went to?
Flagler.
So you were arrested for your actions that night,
Yes, ma'am.
and you're serving your sentence now.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What kind of injuries did you have from this?
Chipped teeth. My nose was broke 4 times. My shoulder blade was fractured. My elbow was broken multiple times.
Okay. How many teeth of yours were chipped?
5.
Did you have any of those injuries prior to about 1 a.m. on December 29th,
No, ma'am.
2019? Did they know right away that you had broken your elbow?
At Flagler? No, ma'am. They released me saying it was hyperextended.
Okay.
It took St. Johns County to put me on the upper bunk, and I refused to get up there. I couldn't. And then they took me back that night to the hospital because they said their x-rays were fuzzy, and they redid it and told me it was broken multiple times and put me in a splint.
Okay. So you go to the hospital, then to the jail, and then back to the hospital to have your elbow looked at.
Yes, ma'am.
Had you injured yourself at the jail at all?
No, ma'am. I was in a 1-man quarantine infirmary, so
Okay. So all of the injuries were from December 29th.
yes, ma'am.
Do you have any lasting injuries or disfigurement or disability from this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's start with your face. Tell us, what injuries do you have or lasting disfigurement on your face?
Other than a crooked nose and the scarring, that's it.
Okay. Judge, may the witness pull his face mask down briefly?
Yes, you may. Go ahead and pull it down. You can, there you go.
Where do you have scarring on your face?
Top of my face and on the side right here.
And do you have any lasting issues with your arm or with your elbow?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's first start with your elbow. What lasting issues do you have with your elbow?
UF Shands and the orthopedic surgeon that came to Lake County that gave me my cortisone and the other shots told me that it was my radial head.
Well, let's focus on,
Sustained.
is there any disformity to your elbow still?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, do you still need further medical treatment for it? Without getting into it, do you still need further medical treatment?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, What about any lasting injuries from your shoulder?
Yes, ma'am.
What was that?
Separated AC joint.
What lasting effects do you have from that injury?
I can't no longer go behind my back at all or sustain my weight, like doing dips or getting out of a bunk with my arms behind me, coming down like that. It won't support my weight no more.
And Judge, permission for Mr. Butler to be unhandcuffed momentarily so he can publish to the jury his range of motion issues.
Sure, Deputy, if you would, please go ahead and remove the shackles so that Mr. can exhibit his range of motion.
Okay, Mr. But
Stand or just sit?
if he could please stand, I'd
All right,
appreciate it,
you
Judge.
Just stay right there for me. Thank you.
Mr. Butler, can you please show the jury where you have issues with your mobility?
It no longer goes out no further than that.
And so for the record, you're showing the jury that your right arm, you're unable to fully straighten. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then you just demonstrated for the jury attempting to put your arm over your head. Could you do that one more time for the jury? So are you unable to straighten your arm?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. He may be seated again, Judge. Judge, at this time, the state would move into evidence what's been pre-marked for identification as State's Exhibit C. It's certified business records from Flagler Hospital for Mr. Butler's medical records.
Any objection? That'll be received as states, are we at 3 now? States Exhibit 3.
Mr. Butler, was your photo taken when you were booked into the jail?
Yes, ma'am.
Judge, permission to approach the witness.
You may.
Mr. Butler, I'm handing you what's been pre-marked for identification as State's Exhibit B1 and B2.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recognize those photos?
Yes, ma'am.
And what are those pictures of?
My booking photo.
Okay. Do you remember how long, was it 2 days later that this was taken?
Yes, ma'am.
Are they a fair and accurate depiction of how you looked when you were booked into the jail?
Yes, ma'am.
Judge, at this time, the state would move into evidence what's been pre-marked for identification as State B1 and B2.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
That'll be received into evidence as States Exhibit 4.
And permission to publish to the jury.
You may.
For the record, I'm publishing to the jury what's been pre-marked or what's been entered into evidence and marked for identification as States B1. And now what's been pre-marked for identification as States B2. May I have just a moment, Judge?
You may.
And Mr. Butler, is the gentleman that you just identified in the courtroom as the defendant in this case, is that the same person that kicked you in the face?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that the same person who delivered the baton strikes?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't have any further questions, Judge.
All right, cross-examination.
Your Honor, are we permitting us to take our mask off if we say at the podium?
No, not during, just during openings and closings.
Mr. Butler, you described your activities prior to this incident as hanging out with your kids at a piece of property on 210.
Yes, sir.
You were drinking liquor out there that day?
Alcohol, sir.
Were you drinking liquor out there that day?
I don't really remember. I remember beer.
Do you remember shortly after this incident in January of 2020 doing an interview with a Detective Lying from the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office?
No, sir. I
No.
remember Jay Lauren.
That's what I said, sir. Do you remember that interview?
Oh, yes, sir.
Do you think if I showed you a transcript of that interview, it would help you determine what you were actually drinking that day?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
For the record, may I approach the witness with the transcript, Your Honor?
You may.
Page 46. If you could just read that to yourself and let me know when you're done.
Say page 46, counsel?
I did, Your Honor.
This is not, you're not referring to the deposition, correct?
So
This
the
is,
recorded interview
do you have
on
the other?
January 12th.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Does that help refresh your recollection?
Okay, yes, sir.
Were you drinking liquor that day?
Yes, sir.
You're a three-time convicted felon
Yes, sir.
on probation on December 29th, 2019, correct?
Yes, sir.
And when you're on felony probation, you can't use any drugs.
Drugs, sir. Yes, sir.
And the way that they test to determine whether you're using drugs is with a urinalysis, right?
Yes, sir.
And you knew that taking the cold medicine, the Corsidian, wouldn't show up on a drug test, right?
Yes, sir.
You took about, what, 12 to 15 pills at 9:30 that night?
Yes, sir.
And you left out to go, I guess, get some property that you left behind on this property on 210?
Yes, sir.
Your girlfriend at the time's name was Courtney.
Yes, sir.
She told you not to drive.
Yes, sir.
You drove anyways.
Yes, sir.
And just a few moments ago on direct examination, Mr. Williker asked you about whether you had a good recollection of the evening. Do you remember her asking you that question?
Yes, sir.
And then, in my recollection of your response was that you don't have a great recollection. Is that true?
It depends.
Okay.
It kind of gets muddled between seeing the video so much.
Depend on what's convenient for you and what's not convenient for you?
No, sir.
Well, let's talk about some things that you do remember. You remember having the presence of mind to know when you're driving down the road on 95 that you started to feel bad, right?
Yes, sir.
You reduced your speed,
Yes, sir.
and you did so because you didn't want to crash.
Yes, sir.
You were trying to get the car to a safe place.
Yes, sir.
You didn't want it to get impounded.
Yes, sir.
You felt that you needed some medical help.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Those are pretty specific recollections. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Take some presence of mind to appreciate all those things that we just talked about.
Yes, sir.
You even had a specific location in mind, your girlfriend's place of employment, right?
Yes, sir.
And on direct examination, you said that you had pulled in voluntarily to the parking lot. That's not true, is it?
The Winn-Dixie parking lot?
Yeah, that's not true.
No, sir. It is.
Okay. Do you remember a patrol vehicle in front of your vehicle guiding you towards that particular entryway?
No, sir.
So if the jury were to see a video, your testimony today is there's no patrol vehicle in front of yours slowing down and guiding you towards that entrance.
No, what I'm saying is the Winn-Dixie, if you pull into the Winn-Dixie, it connects to the adjoining car lot of the Daly's gas station, sir.
And would you agree that there's probably 75 to 150 parking spots in the Winn-Dixie shopping center?
I don't know. I've never taken time to count, sir.
Okay, there's more than 5. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
You didn't park in one of those.
No, sir. They corralled me at the end and forced me to stop there.
But you were just pulling over so you could get medical help and put the car in a safe spot. You weren't trying to take the cops on a wild goose chase.
No, no, absolutely not.
But you didn't turn the car off. You actually, the curb stopped the car. Isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
Did you bite any law enforcement officer?
No, sir.
Now, when I ask you that question, do you have a specific recollection of not biting anybody, or do you not remember what you did?
I ain't never been a biter, sir.
Okay. Now, I want to take you back to the interview that you gave with Detective Long. that you
Yes.
just- December 29th, 2020.
Yes, sir.
That interview was well closer in time than we sit here today. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Do you believe that you've been consistent in saying that you outright deny biting any law enforcement officer?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, may I approach with the transcript?
You may. We clarified the dates that you just said though, Mr. Probisco. I believe the incident happened in 2019 in
I'm sorry.
December. Is this interview in 2020 or 2021?
I believe it's 2020, but the transcript
Okay,
reflects otherwise.
all right.
approaching the witness with page 29 of the transcript.
Okay.
Towards the bottom of the page. Go ahead and read that to yourself.
Oh, yes, sir.
Did you outright deny the officer's question about it, or did you say that you didn't remember?
I said, he said, do you remember biting him in that response? I said, no, sir. He asked if he performed an illegal chokehold on me and put his, while he was choking me with an arm around my neck.
So
I
what's
said,
the
I don't
tr-
remember.
What's the truth? Do you not remember, or did you not bite him?
It clearly states I did not bite him, sir. Or no, sir, was the answer.
Do you remember going on in the conversation with the Detective Long and suggesting that perhaps that deputy bit himself in order to manufacture the injury?
Yes, sir.
Is that still your position today?
I feel that based on the stories that they collaborated on the affidavits and what shows on the video, that they clearly forged documents and came up with the best option to cover themselves after they realized they was on video.
Okay. You deny swinging at anybody.
Yes, sir.
You deny kicking Anthony Deleo.
Yes, sir.
You deny scratching him.
Yes, sir.
You claim that you were hit with batons, plural.
Yes, sir.
You claim that you were hit in the face with batons.
All of my upper body. Yes, sir.
Okay. And in terms of the injuries to your face, I believe that you testified as to a broken nose.
Yes, sir.
And your face, your teeth were chipped.
Yes, sir.
Would you agree that a person falling from a standing or a kneeling position flat on their face into hard pavement could cause one to break their nose?
It could. Yes, sir.
Would you also agree that when falling onto hard pavement such as asphalt, that's a little bit rough and perhaps jagged in some places, could cause some cutting onto a person's face?
It could. Yes, sir. I believe.
Yes,
certain
that's the answer is
abbreviations,
yes.
Scab. Yes, sir.
Okay. And on December 29, 2019, when you were tased at a point in time, you fell straight on your face into the pavement on the Winn-Dixie parking lot. Isn't that the truth?
I don't recall.
So you only recall the good things for your position and not the bad things. Is that the truth?
If that's the way you'd like to state it, sir.
You had repeated commands to put your hands behind your back, and you didn't do it. Isn't that the truth?
I had repeated commands to do it, sir. I didn't have very much time to oblige and comply to them demands.
So
in
your
between the
testimony
beatings.
would be there's not a point in time in the almost 7 minutes that you were encountering with law enforcement officers that you didn't have a chance to put your hands behind your back. Is that your testimony before this jury?
I would like to say I didn't have sufficient amount of time to comply with their demands in between the severe pain I was suffering at the time and the effects of the cough medicine.
Repeated commands to get on your stomach, right?
Yes, sir.
Did you do that?
It was hard to get on my stomach being tased and hit.
Video shows you trying to stand up multiple times throughout this entire encounter. Do you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you this question. Is someone standing up consistent with complying with the directives of a law enforcement officer?
I was scared for my life. It wasn't a normal stop.
Mr. Butler, did you understand the question that I asked you?
No, sir. Could you restate it?
Is someone standing up multiple times after being requested to get down and surrender consistent with complying with the request of a law enforcement officer?
No, sir.
Video shows you're rolling around at points in time in the video. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you've suggested multiple times that you have kind of a fuzzy memory on certain instances, but you have a very specific memory of specifically rolling around and trying to take out the prongs of the taser. Isn't that true?
I remember sitting up and pulling out a taser prong.
Okay. You had the presence of mind to do that.
No, sir. I was actually, at the time, I was actually confused. I thought it was fishing string I was holding.
And while you were in the jail on these charges, you talked to your mom multiple times?
Yes, sir.
On the,
I would object to this line of question. He's already asked and answered regarding this relevant. Next question.
Sidebar, please. Butler, can you hear us? If we come over here. You're not hooked up? Let's go. All right. Mr. Trubisky, you may proceed.
Mr. Butler, while you were being tased at one point in this encounter, did you roll around and try to take the taser prongs out of your body?
Yes, sir.
And when you did that, you observed the look in the law enforcement officer's face as you were doing so.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you have a specific recollection of how that astounded the officers, do you not?
It didn't astound him. It put him in a fit of rage.
You have a broken right elbow, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you just testified before you got up and you put your hand over your head and you talked about your range of motion being limited.
Yes, sir.
Is that accurate? Okay. Did you bring with you today any medical records from a doctor who made a finding limiting your range of motion?
I believe my attorneys have them. I don't have, I did not bring them personally, sir. No, sir. I came from DOC.
And there was a point in time, kind of later in, maybe minute 5 into this event, where you're on the ground in a push-up position, right? Do you remember that?
No, sir.
Do you remember laying down on the ground at some point in time?
Yes, sir.
You remember getting kicked in the right elbow? Kicked in the right elbow at all by any law enforcement officer?
I don't, not the elbow, sir. I don't remember.
Would you agree that if a person were doing a push-up and get kicked in the right elbow, that could cause their elbow to break?
Objection, Judge calls for speculation.
It's overruled.
Could that cause an elbow to break?
Yes, sir.
But you don't have any memory of that.
No, sir.
You're not alleging that Deputy Deleo kicked you in the right elbow.
Sir.
You're not alleging that Deputy Deleo kicked you in the right elbow.
No, sir.
You were feeling no pain that night. You were feeling no pain that night.
A lot of pain that night, sir.
You were feeling a lot of pain, yet, what was it, 6 tasing cycles didn't stop you?
I don't understand. Is that a statement or a question? sir?
Okay. You claim that you were feeling some pain, but they had to tase you 6 times to get you to comply. Is that true?
I was screaming through every taser.
Would you agree that the exorbitant amount of cold medicine that you took that night made you stronger than normal?
I don't know if it made me give you superhero powers. I didn't ever see it on DC or Marvel, sir.
That's not my question to you, sir. My question was, did it make you stronger than normal?
No, sir. I don't believe so.
Do you have a recollection at the end of the encounter, whenever leg irons were needed to restrain you?
No, sir.
You don't remember being in leg irons and lifting an officer up?
No, sir.
You don't remember it taking Mr. Deleo and Mr. McGinnis both physically on you to have to rip you out of the car?
I remember they were trying to pull me out the car because of my seatbelt. I would not come out the car until they realized I had a seatbelt on.
Deputy Deleo is, and at that time, probably 100 pounds heavier than you.
A good bit, yes, sir.
It's Deputy McGinnis would have been maybe 70 pounds heavier.
Okay, yes, sir.
So just to get this square, your testimony to the jury is it took 2 people with a total of 200 pounds excess your weight to rip you out of that vehicle, but you're saying that drug didn't make me any stronger than normal.
I'm saying that the seatbelt, which prevents you from flying out a windshield at multiple high-speed impacts, prevented me from being pulled out the car until they realized I had a seatbelt on.
How about the point in time when it's taking all of Deputy McGinnis's strength to hold you down? Do you remember that portion of the video?
No, sir. At what time was that?
Well, if you don't remember, you don't remember.
I remember being beat and not subdued. And
I didn't
with the
ask you that,
ulcer.
sir. I asked you a very specific question. I asked you whether you remembered the point in time when Deputy McGinnis had all his weight on you and was struggling to keep you down. If you don't remember that, just say you don't remember that.
No, sir.
And the sentence that you're serving right now is for fleeing and eluding?
Yes, sir.
It's not for battery on former Deputy Deleo?
No, sir.
It's not for battery on Deputy McGinnis?
No, sir.
It's not for resisting an arrest with violence as a Deputy Deleo?
No, sir.
You were arrested on those charges on December 29, 2019.
Yes, sir.
And the state attorney's office charged you formally with those crimes as well, did they not?
Yes, sir.
Think they charged you in January of 2020?
I believe the night I was arrested, I was charged with it.
Would you remember getting formally charged by the state attorney's office? I guess that's my question. And if you need a document to refresh your recollection.
No, sir. When I, like I stated previous, when I woke up in the hospital, the officer that was in there with me told me I already seen first appearance.
March 27th, 2020, the charges of battery on a law enforcement officer as to Deleo is dropped.
Yes, sir.
The charge of battery on a law enforcement officer as to Deputy McGinnis is dropped.
Yes, sir.
The charge of resisting an officer with violence as a Deputy Deleo is dropped by the state attorney's office.
Yes, sir.
And in the months in between that, you retain a law firm to sue the sheriff's office.
Yes, sir. Well, my mother did after I released power of attorney to her.
And one of the reasons why your mother did that is because you helped feed this narrative to the media about you suffering a medical episode while driving down the road.
Approach, please.
Mr. Butler, you've given interviews with the media about the case,
Yes, sir. One.
and you've characterized what happened that night as you were suffering a medical episode.
Yes, sir.
And that's not the truth, is it?
I was going through a severe cold. If that considered a medical episode.
The explanation for your actions was not that you were suffering a diabetic medical episode. It's that you got high intentionally on cough medicine and you freaked out.
Is it fair to say that the cough medicine induced my sugar and put me in a diabetic episode, sir?
Mr. Butler, your intention that evening when you took the cold medicine was not to prevent the symptoms of a cold. Would you agree with that?
I was taking it previous to that, sir,
Okay.
for the symptoms of a cold.
My question, sir, had nothing to do with what you did previously. My question is very specific. When you ingested the 12 to 15 pills that evening, you did so with the intention to get high.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if you made a statement to the media about what was going on that night and said, oh, I was just experiencing a diabetic medical episode, that would not be the truth, would it?
Did I state that, sir?
You just,
No, sir. To the media, I'm asking you, is that what I said to the media,
Okay.
sir?
and that's the position that you were moving forward with the lawsuit against the sheriff's office at the time in 2020, was it not?
No,
That you were suffering a medical episode?
No, the fact that he went above and beyond his job and the policy and procedures with kicks and excessive force. Like you said that night, sir. Okay, they were 70 pounds heavier than me and 100 pounds heavier than me. And there was multiple officers. Is there not a point in time during a 5-minute beating that they could have not have put me to the ground and handcuffed me? But they chose to beat me. They chose to park their squad cars with their dash cams, did not record the incident.
Mr. Deleo, are you familiar in January 2020 with the law firm that you retained to sue the sheriff's office, soliciting information about Officer Deleo and saying Christopher Deleo was savagely beaten while he was experiencing a severe medical condition?
My name's
Are
Christopher.
you aware
Butler.
of that?
It was Christopher Butler, sir.
Excuse me, Christopher Butler.
My mother released all the media footage.
And your mother was in charge of releasing the information to the media, and you had a conversation with your mother prior to her releasing that information, did you not?
I talk to my mother every day. We have a
Okay.
good relationship.
And when you were speaking to your mother, you,
Sustained.
Your Honor, can we approach? Do you remember 73 commands by law enforcement officers? Put your hands behind your back.
That's a lot of commands, sir. No, sir. I remember multiple commands.
You remember multiple commands to put your hands behind your back.
Yes, sir.
And ultimately, at the end of the day, it took 3 grown men to subdue you. Do you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and not just subdue you in handcuffs, but they needed to bring leg restraints in to restrain you as well. Do you agree with that?
They did. I wouldn't agree with it.
No further questions, John.
All right, any redirect? All right.
Mr. Butler, are the details that you clearly remember as far as the traffic stop, is that all before you start to be beat?
Yes, ma'am.
So once you're hit with a baton 20-ish times, tased 10 times, punched and kicked in the face, do things start to get a little fuzzy?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't have any other questions.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for the day. It's about 4:30. So if you would just go ahead and leave your notepads here. We're going to excuse you and ask you to, as I said, come back tomorrow morning. If you could report back to the second floor jury lounge by 8:30. And then we'll get started and get you up here as soon as possible. Shouldn't be any later than 8:45. Once again, just as a reminder, please do not talk about the case with any of your friends or family members. If they inquire and want to talk to you, you can tell them that the judge said no. Don't do any independent research of your own about any of the facts or circumstances involved in this case either. All right, with that, you're free to go. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning. Thank you. All right, jurors have exited the courtroom. Go ahead and allow Mr. Butler. Y'all can take him back and turn the video off.